Shred Show, I'm Chris and I love surfboards. Today we've got another board that Nate Yeomans can do big front side airs on. This is the V3 Rocket as surfed here by Ian Crane. More clips to come from this session later. But first, big shouts out to Justin in New Zealand, Adam in Queensland, Marcus in Florida, and everyone who asked for this one. You know who you are. You really can't look at this board without first noticing these three sets of wings back here. Some shapers would not call this third set of wings back here wings, but I do because it's stepping down the width of the board where the diamond tail begins. Each set of wings creates a section of the board with less surface area than the section preceding it. And if we watch that clip that we just saw of Nate doing an air on this board in slow motion, we get a really good example of how a skilled surfer might use these. Here he gets to his feet and pumps for speed, and if we pause this, we see his back foot is placed pretty far forward on the tail, about equal to where the first set of wings is. Now keep looking at his back foot as he begins his second pump down the line, and notice that it's in the same place. That's useful because the board is wider there, helping create speed when he pushes on it, just like it did during his first pump. Okay, now here's where it gets interesting. As soon as he uses this second pump to project forward, we can watch him release his back foot from the board and replace it further back on the tail than it was for those first two speed pumps. This new foot placement lets him leverage the decreased surface area behind that second set of wings for less direction down the line and more pivot towards the lip, so that he can direct all that speed he just created towards this ramp for a big frontside launch. Now, aside from giving you different areas on the deck to leverage with your foot for different maneuvers, these wings also create different points on the bottom of the board where water releases abruptly in sections. That can help you angle more tightly in turns than an elliptical tail, which would have a rounded outline like this. And another thing wings can do when grouped over such a short distance like this is promote more release from the water than a rounded tail would. For example, watch Ian's last move on this wave and look at how quickly he can release the board on the shoulder, where a more rounded tail would want to hold onto the water more instead of breaking free quite as easy. Looking at the rest of this board's outline, you can see that from about 24 inches in from the nose to about 12 inches in from the tail, this board looks like it has very straight rails. That means you've got two relatively parallel rails running through the middle 3 feet of the board. That's very useful for generating speed off of your front foot, for example, weighting it down more heavily as you drive down the line, because of the way that it creates a long, straight, foam-rich surface for gliding across the water, where another board may have more curve in its outline through here or more curve in its outline through here, making the board just a little bit more narrow through here and through here. From a design perspective, these straight rails also mean that you're going to have a lot of width to trim away in the back 12 inches of the board. That is, if you want to keep the board maneuverable or make it friendly in a little bit more powerful waves, and these wing sets offer a very quick way to do that. In the front of the board, we see the same thing with a little bit more curvy of a nose outline than normal because of the way that the curve is accelerating so quickly to get to this point in the nose right here. That quickness of outline curve is what makes the board more narrow through here, and that's useful for keeping the board more whippy through turns, where a wider nose might make gliding a little bit easier, but you'd have more board in the way up here. Single concave, not wasting any time getting very deep. Deep single concave, staying there, staying noticeably there all the way through the tail. What this might mean for your surfing is that you can get going faster than you would imagine down the line because of how the speed generating characteristics of these relatively parallel rails work with the lifting capabilities of a single concave to create a real engine for speed beneath your feet. These two elements together can help with blowing past sections with ease like we see here. Looking at the rocker, there's probably a little bit more than you would expect in the last 6 to 8 inches of the tail when you compare this to other similar hybrids. Of course, that helps with tight pivot from the pocket like we saw Nate do in that clip earlier. Also, it makes the board easier to control in more punchy, curvy waves because this curve up in the tail will fit the curve of a wave face behind the board better. Interestingly, that rocker works with the final most narrow section of the board in those type of punchy waves as well, because of the way that this lower amount of foam here will actually sit down in the face of a wave more as it bends up behind it. To me, these rails look like about what you would expect in a shortboard, and if you look at the lineage of boards that this model evolved from, you find that Lost has made changes to things like the outline of the board and the rocker and the tail shape, but they really haven't changed the rails much from board to board. In general, I think that what surfers who like this board notice most when compared to more standard shortboards is how relatively faster this board fires down the line because of the parallel rails and because of the single concave. Also, since this board gets its increased ease of planing primarily from more parallel rails and not at a lot of width increase from the center compared to your standard shortboard, this board still surfs familiar to the type of board that you would ride at about the same length as you are tall, while this board you'd surf a few inches shorter than your height for a little bit more on top of the water, buoyant feel. I think this is a really versatile shape that could be fun anywhere from knee-high to even as much as a few feet overhead, but you may find this board especially magic in like knee to chest-high beach break that's a little bit punchy, that let you fire down the line for a couple strokes before hitting a closeout section with whatever tricks you've got in your bag. Shred Nation, that's it for this episode. If you are surfing the V3 Rocket or any other boards in the Rocket family by Lost, please tell us what you think in the YouTube comments down below. The waves are fun and the water's warm in San Diego right now, and we hope you are just as fortunate wherever you call home, and we'll see you soon on Shred Show.